Right now, in a barn somewhere, a rusty chainsaw is worth more than a brand new one, because the company that built it is dead. These aren't junk. These brands once ruled the forest. One built the first saw you could hold in one hand. One was the biggest chainsaw maker on the entire planet. One was powered by the same engine that ran US Army spy drones, and every single one vanished. 10 legends, 10 machines the woods forgot. Let's dig them up. Number 10. Wright. Let's start with the weirdest one, because Wright didn't even build a real chainsaw. It didn't have a chain. The Wright saw came out of Sheboygan, Wisconsin, built by a division of Thomas Industries, and instead of a loop of chain spinning around a bar, the Wright used a straight blade that jabbed back and forth, a reciprocating saw. Picture a giant electric carving knife with a two-stroke engine bolted to the back. The flagship was the Model C50D, introduced in 1962. It weighed about 23 pounds and topped out around 2,500 RPM. And here's the problem. It cut slowly, really slowly. The blade only moved a tiny fraction of an inch on each stroke, so to actually clear the sawdust out of the cut, you had to rock the whole saw back and forth yourself. Loggers who were used to a screaming chain that ate through a log in seconds took one look at the Wright and walked away. But the Wright had a strange second life. Because it used a flat blade instead of a chain, butchers and farmers figured out you could swap in a fine-toothed blade and use it to quarter cattle and dress deer. There are still old-timers who remember watching their dad field dress a hog with a Wright. Wright also made more conventional models like the Gear Drive GS 2016, which ran from about 1960 to 1962. But the reciprocating idea just never caught on for cutting trees. It was too slow, too heavy, too fiddly. Here's the twist though. That reciprocating design that flopped in the forest, it basically became the Sawzall. The reciprocating saw sitting in your garage right now. Wright was ahead of its time. It just picked the wrong industry. So it faded out of logging almost as fast as it arrived. A genuine evolutionary dead end in the family tree of the chainsaw. Number 9. Jo. Now let's leave America and go to Norway, to a little town called Drøbak, on the water south of Oslo. That's where a company called Jo built chainsaws. Jo AS Mekaniske Verksted. Jo made some seriously capable saws for their day. The Jo Senior was introduced around 1957 with a 76cc engine, and by 1960 they had a monster pushing 93cc. In a cold, timber-heavy country like Norway, these were tools people trusted. But here's the reason Jo deserves a spot on this list: the accessories. Because Jo didn't just want to sell you a saw, they sold a propeller attachment that let you bolt your chainsaw engine onto a boat and use it as an outboard motor. Cut your firewood in the morning, unbolt the power head, clamp it to the back of a dinghy, and putter across the fjord in the afternoon. They also made an auger attachment so you could drill holes in the ground or through ice. One little engine, a whole toolbox of jobs. That kind of clever do-everything engineering is exactly what made small regional brands special before the industry got swallowed by a few giants. But being clever isn't the same as being big. Jo got absorbed, first into the Norwegian firm Christiania Spigerverk, and then in 1983, the whole thing was sold to Electrolux in Sweden. Electrolux already owned Husqvarna and a stack of other saw brands. They did not need a small Norwegian competitor. So production of Jo saws was simply shut down. The propeller kits, the augers, the fjord-crossing chainsaw dream, all of it just stopped. Today, a running Jo with its outboard attachment is a collector's unicorn. Number 8. Danarm. Cross the North Sea to Britain and you get one of the oldest names on this entire list, Danarm. The Danarm story starts in 1941, in the middle of the Second World War, in Gloucestershire, England. The name is a mashup. A designer named J. Clubley Armstrong teamed up with a Stroud engineering firm, Th&J Daniels. Take Daniels, take Armstrong, smash them together, Danarm. That's the whole name. Their earliest saws were powered by Villiers two-stroke engines, ranging from a modest 80cc all the way up to a brutal 350cc. And the one collectors love most is the Danarm Whipper. The Whipper had a genuinely brilliant feature, a rotating coupling on the front, so you could set the bar and chain vertically for felling, then swing it horizontal for bucking, or lock it anywhere in between. Some later versions even ran on a J-app. Engine with an Amel carburetor, the same kind of British engineering you'd find on old motorcycles. For decades, Danarm was the chainsaw of British and Commonwealth forestry. If you were cutting timber in the UK from the 1940s through the 1960s, there's a very good chance you were swinging a Danarm. They were rugged, they were repairable, and they were everywhere. But Britain's whole small engine industry got hammered in the second half of the century, squeezed between cheaper, lighter saws from Sweden, Germany, and Japan. The big Villiers-powered British saws started to feel like relics. Danarm slowly faded from the professional woods and eventually disappeared as a serious force. Today the name mostly survives in the memories of old foresters and on the tags of saws hanging in British forestry museums. Number 7. Power Machinery, PM. Back to Canada now, specifically Vancouver, British Columbia, which in the 1940s was basically the Silicon Valley of chainsaws. So many saw companies came out of that one coastal timber region. One of them was Power Machinery Limited, usually just badged PM. It was started by a man named Sandy Mega, and here's a detail that tells you how tight-knit and cutthroat that early scene was. Mega had come out of another famous Vancouver chainsaw company before breaking off to do his own thing. The whole industry was a handful of guys in the Pacific Northwest all racing to build a better saw and poaching each other's talent. Power Machinery jumped into the chainsaw market in 1947, and they moved fast. By 1950, just 3 years in, PM had sold nearly 18,000 saws. That is a staggering number for that era, when a chainsaw was still a rare, expensive, slightly terrifying machine. More than half of those were a single model, the PM Wood Boss. The Wood Boss did exactly what its name promised. It was a working man's saw for the giant timber of coastal British Columbia, where the trees are the size of buildings and a saw either performs or gets thrown in the scrap pile. So why have you never heard of PM? Because the chainsaw boom of the late 1940s and 1950s turned into a bloodbath of consolidation. There were dozens of small makers, and the market brutally sorted them out. The ones without deep pockets and national distribution got squeezed, bought, or simply outcompeted. Power Machinery, despite that incredible early sales sprint, couldn't hold its ground long-term against the giants who were about to show up on this list. It's one of the great what-could-have-been brands of the golden age. Number 6. Titan. Number 6 is a brand that got eaten twice. Titan. Titan Chainsaws Incorporated, set up in Seattle, Washington, right in the heart of Pacific Northwest logging country. Their very early two-man saw, the Titan A, was one of a whole wave of North American saws whose design was heavily inspired by the pre-war German steel BD. Because once the war cut off imports from Germany, American builders felt zero obligation to respect the patents of an enemy country. So they copied the best design available and ran with it. Titan's real signature saws came at the start of the 1950s. The Titan 40 arrived in 1950, a one-man saw with a 74cc engine. The Titan 60 followed in 1951. These were solid, no-nonsense working saws that showed up in hardware stores across the country. There are collectors today whose grandfathers bought a Titan brand new in the late 50s to clear a few trees at the family hunting camp, and the saw still sits in the family. Then came the corporate machinery. Titan got bought up by FMC, a big industrial conglomerate, and FMC was juggling 3 chainsaw brands at once: the green and yellow Boland's line, the red and white Fleetwood line, and the tan and yellow Titan line. Some of these saws were literally the same machine wearing different paint and a different badge. When you're running 3 overlapping brands that compete with each other, something has to give. FMC eventually decided its chainsaw divisions were a drain on more profitable parts of the business, and so, after 1962, FMC pulled the plug, discontinuing both the Boland's and the Titan chainsaw lines. A brand that had its own factory and its own loyal buyers just got switched off by a spreadsheet decision in a corporate boardroom. That's how a lot of these giants died, not in the forest, but in an accountant's office. Number 5. Lombard. Halfway through, and this one has the boldest claim of all. Lombard literally advertised itself as the oldest name in chainsaws. And they had a point. The Lombard company traces back to 1894, when a man named Nathaniel Lombard built the first practical water wheel governor in Roxbury, Massachusetts. In 1904, the company moved to Ashland, Massachusetts, and made industrial equipment, governors, hydraulic lathes for machining artillery shells during World War I. Chainsaws came later, starting in 1943. Lombard's first saws, the GS Series Model 6, were fascinating because they didn't even build their own engine at first. They bolted on a Homelite 24-mite-1 industrial engine, a 6-horsepower unit originally designed to run water pumps and generators. They only sold about 500 gas saws in those first few years. This was the absolute frontier of the technology. But Lombard kept pushing. In 1949, they released the OMS, one-man saw, one of their first saws light enough for a single operator. And then, at the end of the 1950s, Lombard did something incredible. They built the Fury. The Fury competition saws, powered by a Big Power Products AH81 engine displacing nearly 131 cc, were widely considered the best racing chainsaws in the world at the time. For years, if you wanted to win a timber cutting competition, you wanted a Lombard Fury. They also made one saw that's fascinating for the wrong reason. The L30, built only from 1962 to 1964, it got pulled after just 2 years, partly over safety concerns, because it had no proper way to sharpen or tension the chain. Even the best companies made duds. Lombard survived a long time, renaming itself, changing its paint and model numbers, quietly recycling designs into the 1970s. But the golden years were over. Production finally ground to a halt around 1984. 90 years after that first water wheel governor, the oldest name in chainsaws was gone. Number 4. Mercury/Diston. Now the story gets wild, because this saw was designed by a legend, powered by a boat engine, and it went to war. The engine genius was Elmer Carl Kiekhaefer, the same Kiekhaefer whose name is on Mercury outboard motors and Mercury racing to this day. During World War II, the US government wanted a lightweight 2-man chainsaw. The Army's own engineers couldn't figure it out. Kiekhaefer designed a working one in under 2 months. And it wasn't just fast to design, it was fast to cut. The Kiekhaefer-powered saw could rip through a 2-foot-thick green log in 17 seconds. The nearest competitor took 52. That's not a small win, that's a knockout. Mercury won the contract and by the end of the war was the largest chainsaw manufacturer in the world. But Kiekhaefer only made engines. He needed bars, chains and helper handles, so he partnered with an old respected Philadelphia sawmaker, Henry Diston & Sons. Kiekhaefer built the power, Diston supplied the cutting hardware. The finished saws wore names like Mercury, Diston or Kiekhaefer. The most famous of them is the DA201. This was a 2-man beast, a 9-horsepower, 2-cylinder engine straight out of Mercury's outboard playbook. It sounded like a boat motor tearing through the woods, and a version of it was standard issue for the US Army during the Korean War, delivered in a kit with a gas can, oil can, spare chains, spare parts, and a full toolbox. This was a military machine. So why did it vanish? Because Kiekhaefer looked at post-war America and saw that everyone was about to buy a boat. Outboard motors were about to explode into a gold mine, and chainsaws, heavy, brutal, 2-man chainsaws, were a distraction. So Mercury simply walked away from the saw business to chase the water. The Kiekhaefer Corporation was later sold to Brunswick in 1961. The man who built the world's biggest chainsaw company gave it up to sell outboards and became a boating legend instead. Number 3. Maul. Top 3. And number 3 is a name that was once stamped on tools all over North America, Maul. The Maul Tool Company was founded back in 1921 by a man named Arthur W. Maul, originally in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, before he moved it to Chicago where he'd grown up. Maul made a huge range of power tools, but their chainsaws are what collectors chase today. The legend of the lineup is the Maul 2MG, a 2-man saw from the early 1950s with one genuinely clever trick. The carburetor and fuel tank could swivel. Why does that matter? On an early float carburetor saw, if you tipped the engine sideways, the fuel would slosh and the saw would flood or starve. So Maul built the 2MG so the carb could rotate to stay level whether you were felling a tree with the bar vertical or bucking a log with the bar horizontal. It was a smart solution to a problem modern saws don't even have anymore. Maul also built bigger machines like the Maul 6, a large 2-cycle saw pushing around 200 cc, a serious chunk of iron. These were tough, overbuilt, industrial-grade tools from the era when a chainsaw was more like heavy machinery than a garden appliance. So what happened? In 1956, Maul Tool Company was bought by Remington Arms, yes, the firearms company, the same Remington that had been making guns since 1816. Remington folded Maul's chainsaw line into its new power tool division and started building saws under the Remington name. The Maul brand basically dissolved into Remington. And here's the sad part. Even Remington's chainsaw business kept getting passed around like a hot potato. Sold to Desa Industries in 1969, swept up by MCA in 1975. The name eventually landed with MTD decades later. The proud old Mall Tool Company, which had been building tools since 1921, got swallowed, rebranded, and finally forgotten. Number 2. IEL/Pioneer, the Beaver. Number 2 isn't just a forgotten brand. This is the company that invented the chainsaw as you know it. Back to Vancouver, British Columbia. In 1944, a company called Industrial Engineering Limited, IEL, hand-built a prototype saw with a tiny 45cc engine, and in 1944-1946 they turned it into a product that changed everything, the Beaver. Here's why the Beaver matters more than almost any saw ever built. Before it, a chainsaw was a two-man machine. Two guys, one on each end, wrestling a heavy screaming monster, sharing the weight because no single person could hold it. The IEL Beaver was the first one-man chainsaw, the first saw light enough, at around 35 pounds, for a single logger to pick up, carry to the tree, and run alone. Think about what that did. Overnight, one man could fell and cut more timber in a day than a whole crew used to. It didn't just change productivity, it changed the status of loggers. They went from being seen as lowly laborers to being viewed as skilled machine operators. One saw did that. IEL followed the Beaver with the Super Pioneer in 1951, and it became one of the most successful chainsaws on Earth, dominating the Pacific Northwest. The Pioneer name became huge. Then, in 1956, the American giant Outboard Marine Corporation, OMC, bought IEL and moved production east to Peterborough, Ontario. OMC kept the Pioneer name alive, and Pioneer saws sold well into the late 1970s, but OMC finally ended Pioneer chainsaw production in 1977. A group of former engineers tried to revive it, one last stand for the brand that started it all, but that effort collapsed in 1983. The company that built the very first one-man chainsaw, the machine that every modern saw descends from, simply stopped. That's how thoroughly the forest forgets. Number 1. McCulloch. And number 1, the biggest fall of all. Because this wasn't a small regional maker, this was, for a while, the most famous chainsaw brand on the entire planet, McCulloch. The company was founded in 1943 in Milwaukee by Robert Paxton McCulloch, and it moved to Los Angeles in 1946. In 1948 it launched its first chainsaw, the Model 549, a 49-pound 5-horsepower saw. Then in 1949 came the game changer, the one-man Model 325, weighing just 25 pounds. McCulloch took the one-man saw idea and made it lighter, faster, and available to everybody, not just professional loggers but ordinary homeowners. That move cracked the consumer market wide open. From there, McCulloch became a powerhouse. They built brutal professional saws like the Super 797, big displacement monsters for felling giant West Coast timber. They built the Power Mac line for weekend users. Robert McCulloch was so rich and so bold that in 1968 he literally bought the London Bridge, shipped it stone by stone to Arizona, and rebuilt it in the desert to create Lake Havasu City, the town where his chainsaw factories were. That's how big McCulloch was. The chainsaw company that bought a bridge. But giants have far to fall. Black & Decker bought McCulloch in 1974. It got sold again to a private group in 1984. And through the 1990s, McCulloch got crushed between tougher new emissions rules it struggled to meet and a flood of competition. In January 1999, McCulloch Motors Corporation filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The European side was sold to Electrolux, the parent of Husqvarna. The North American operation was bought that October by a Taiwanese company, Zhenfeng. And that was it. The most powerful name in chainsaw history, the company that put a one-man saw in every garage and moved a bridge across an ocean, gone as an independent maker. Today McCulloch is just a badge owned by the Husqvarna Group, slapped on homeowner saws. The king of the forest didn't die in the forest. It died in bankruptcy court. If you've got one of these rusting in a shed, a Beaver, a DA211, a Fury, you're holding a piece of history that's genuinely getting rarer every year. Tell me in the comments which one your family owned. And if this brought back a memory, hit subscribe, because next time we're digging up even more machines the world left behind.